Hope you are having a great start to your Wednesday. We are reacting to a lot in the world of sports. First of all, Tennessee Titans in the world of the NFL. The NFL Week 4 commences tomorrow with a barn burner of a game. 2 0-3 squads going head-to-head. The Denver Broncos, I think it's against the New York Jets. That's pretty much the worst matchup you could possibly imagine if you had to decide what game to play on Thursday night. So we'll see how that goes. The NBA Finals will be beginning tonight. The Lakers going up against the Heat. Also, we have got 8 different Major League Baseball games going on all day long today, starting at noon Eastern, with everybody being able to watch 16 teams in action. We were just talking about the Minnesota Twins and their unbelievable streak of postseason futility, the likes of which has never existed. And I can't even imagine that it potentially could go to, was it 18 games now? Today, if they can't find a way to get a win in the postseason, their record of futility will continue. We were also reacting to the debate last night and asking for the perfect sports analogy for what that debate was like. My analogy to start off the show was it's like a UFC fight where both fighters spend the entire time on the ground and you can never actually really kind of tell what's going on. There's just not much rhyme or reason to it. It's everybody rolling around on the ground, grappling with each other, trying to make sense of that wildness. I said we would open up the phone lines, 877-996-6369. We'll get to that in a moment. Positive from the NFL front, I want to bring in the crew and discuss this a little bit. The 3 Titans players are not central in theory. You've got a defensive lineman, a long snapper, and a practice squad player. If it doesn't grow from there, then in theory the Titans could still play the Steelers on Sunday, which is the preference for the NFL, or potentially bump it back a day and play on Monday. Was your first thought when you heard that the Titans had an outbreak, oh, of course Clay Travis's team would have the outbreak? Be honest, was that your first thought, Danny G?
Yeah, that was 1A, and 1B was, oh my God, I hope this is not Derrick Henry going to a strip club to get wings.
Yeah. Strip clubs have remained open in Nashville, by the way. You can't go to many different bars and restaurants. They've been shut down, although they're back open now. If you're making a trip, they have to close at 11 starting tomorrow on October 1st. Can be 50% occupancy here in this city. But I bet a huge percentage of listeners, their first thought was, first of all, the Titans are finally 3-0. And then, of course, they end up with an outbreak. Dub, was your first thought? What was your first thought when you heard about the Titans news?
Well, I was just hoping that it wasn't someone, let's say, of significance like Derrick Henry or Ryan Tannehill.
Because you think of these 3 guys that they named, I'm not trying to, make it – and by the way, they're all asymptomatic is the report. There are 5 different people associated with the team in terms of being staff members. And then there are 3 players, and all 8 of those guys are asymptomatic. So it's not like they're sick. But, yeah, I think the first thought was, is it Ryan Tannehill? Is it Derrick Henry? Is it somebody that people are going to be able to recognize? I don't know what the impact would be of trying in some way to get ready for a game remotely without being able to meet face-to-face or go through anything on the practice field. I would think that would make it exceedingly more difficult. But in terms of the guys that they would be without, if this thing doesn't grow from here, that's not kind of the end of the world, right, for the Titans as you look at the list of who was actually put on the COVID list?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the end of the world, I would think. And it's an interesting thought. What would happen if you spent the whole week preparing for a game basically online? That's obviously never happened before. But I mean, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think they're going to push this game back? Or are they going to play Sunday? What have you heard anything?
I think first of all, I think it depends on how many more players test positive or not. I think the easy solution if they don't play is to bump it back to week 7 and bump the Ravens and the Steeler game to week 8 and give both of these teams an early bye week, much earlier probably than they would have wanted in week 4. But I think what the NFL wants to do is play because there's a concern that you might have other outbreaks. What I had been told before the season started was that it was possible that the NFL could bump back the Super Bowl by several weeks. So, in other words, if you had to start the playoffs later and add a couple of additional weeks to the end of the season, you could make up games then and allow the season to still progress, every game to be played, but you would just start the playoffs later, and obviously then the Super Bowl would be later. So that is what I had been told from the moment they started, that the NFL wanted to get every team with 16 games in, that they understood that there would be different varieties of outbreaks during the course of the season, and when, not if they happen, but when they happen, they wanted to be flexible with their schedule and actually make that possible in terms of the way that they could make that a reality. So I think what the NFL ideally wants to do is play on Sunday as is normal, because in the event that there's a later issue for the Steelers or the Titans, it preserves the ability to still adjust the schedule as necessary. But if they have to adjust the schedule, then they can at the end of the season. So that's kind of what I think will happen. What do you think will happen, Eddie? How do you think the NFL will play this out?
Well, this is interesting because I was a Steeler fan.
Yeah, right.
My first thought, being the selfish bastard I am, was my team going to play football this weekend? Am I going to have a game to watch? But I definitely think they want to play the game. I think they definitely want to show that this is something that they can handle and get through and go on as scheduled. But, of course, they don't want the Titans to be completely at a disadvantage, so maybe they push the game back and let the Titans at least have one day of practice, I would think. So maybe they push it to Monday.
Yeah.
If there are no other positive tests.
Does everybody agree that you can't set the precedent? You have to play. Like, I would rather them not play the game and say, okay, these two are only going to play 15 games, and we'll do what did Major League Baseball, did everybody get in 60? I didn't even look at the final standing. So what was it, within a couple? The Cardinals didn't finish?
The Cardinals played, like, I think 58 games.
Okay, so they finished a couple of games short, and the Cardinals are in the postseason. So you could look at the win situation. You could also bump it back and say, hey, we're going to wait a week to start the postseason. Everybody gets a bye week before we start, but these teams may need to play, and see if that game were to matter. Let's see whether or not it would matter. But I think what the NFL wants to do is play it on Sunday or Monday.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Like, they would do, like, somehow not just do percentage-wise and maybe only play. But the problem would be with, like, if a team gets – it happens to a team multiple times, like you did the Marlins, had the big spread that they had.
Yeah.
Then you get into a big – what are you going to do in that situation, right? If a team has to miss 2 games or 3 games because of it.
Yeah, I would imagine that everybody is getting tested again for the Titans early this morning, would be my guess, and that they will do that on Thursday and Friday and Saturday as well. So you would have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 4 or 5 days of testing. The average number of days when it will show up is between 4 and 5. And if you continue to test and there's no symptoms and everything else, that in theory they could come back Saturday, have a practice on Saturday. And then obviously the benefit for the Titans is they don't have to travel at all. So it's not like they have to spend the time to travel to get ready for the game. But I do think potentially bumping it to Monday could make sense, or just saying screw it. I actually think it's an intriguing question of what's the actual impact of preparing for a game without being able to do a normal week of practice. Can you implement a new game plan? Do you have to be just super vanilla if you're the Titans and not try to add any, special wrinkles for the Steelers, because it's more complicated to add those wrinkles remotely? I think those are really interesting questions. We got open phone lines, by the way, 877-996-6369. For those of you who watched the debate last night, how would you compare it to a sporting event? What came to mind? I think some people want to weigh in, Dub.
Absolutely. Let's start here in Tennessee with Charlie.
Charlie, what would you make the analogy of sports for the debate last night?
Hey, thanks for taking my call. Yeah, they look like two sumo wrestlers, man. They both look ridiculous. Made no sense when they was talking. You couldn't understand sumo wrestlers when they slam into each other and stuff, and you really don't know what the rules are to sumo to actually win.
Yeah.
So, they might as well be giving each other wedgies.
Yeah, thanks for the call. Sumo wrestling fight, not a bad analogy. I don't know anything about sumo, but you just kind of watch two guys just throw themselves at each other over and over again, not really sure what the goal is there. Who's up next, Dub?
We got Rick in Cincinnati.
Rick, what analogy would you make for the debate last night from a sporting perspective?
Yeah, I was going to say, it was like watching the Cincinnati Bengals versus the Philadelphia Eagles.
I actually wonder how many people will just decide, screw it, I'm not even going to vote. I'm curious to see how many people were watching, but I wonder if a lot of people were just turned off and they said, I don't even want to engage in this process. There's the people who are motivated who are Democrats. There's the people who are motivated who are Republicans that are going to vote every year. And I respect everybody who goes out and votes. I'm going to vote. I vote every year, even if I don't think the options are great. And I always will. That's just something that I think is literally the least I can do. And I enjoy the political process in general, but especially with young kids, I think it's my parents did this with me. I think it's instructive. Go stand in line, show your ID, take your kid in the voting booth with you, show how democracy works. That's what I have done in the past, and that's what I will continue to do in the future. But I do think there are a lot of people out there listening, and also probably people who are watching, that just said, screw it, it's not worth my time. I'm just not even going to bother voting this year. I think that's the downside of what I would say was a debate that felt like two guys just rolling around in the mud, throwing haymakers at each other. Dub, who's next?
We got Nick in New York.
Nick, what's the analogy you would make?
Hey, Clay, how you doing? Love the show.
Appreciate that.
No problem. I would have to just give two people. I was saying it's like Jerry Jones versus Al Davis in like his last few months on hospice, where like they would cut over from the game, they'd cut to the booth, and it's like, wow, Al Davis, he's got to have either nurses or I don't even know, like just put a fork in him. He's done.
Al Davis versus Jerry Jones in their final months of life together in a brawl.
Just talking.
Just talking. Just arguing back and forth. Not even actually fighting. Thanks for the call. Yeah. Not even actually fighting. Just talking back and forth. Oh, man. Dub, how many other calls? Do we want to go to break, or what's the situation here?
We got one more if we want them.
All right, I'll take him.
We got Joshua in Indianapolis.
Joshua in Indianapolis, what's your analogy?
Hey, Clay, I really like the guy with the sumo wrestling. You really can't go wrong. There's a bunch of old men just going back and forth. Bear with me a little bit. First-time caller. Love your show and everything. The one thing I did want to point out is with the whole LeBron James things with the no comment, which I agree 100%. You guys went around the table and really talked about how he had nothing to say there. I was just wondering what your comment was with President Trump when he was supposed to condemn white supremacy last night, and he decided not to say anything. I was wondering what you guys' opinion was on that. Thank you.
I mean, he said a billion times that he's opposed to white supremacy, right? I mean, I think questions like that are not particularly useful, where it's like, do you condemn X, Y, or Z? Will you? I thought Chris Wallace had a rough night of it. And partly it's because Biden and Trump didn't help him in any way, but he didn't seem nonpartisan to me, and many of his questions took way too long to get out. I'm in the interview business a lot of times, and when you had those guys talking over each other as much as they were, did you guys notice that? A lot of his questions had like 2 paragraphs of prelude, and both of them would start to try to answer what he was saying before they actually got to the question. And it took so long for him to get to the run-up of the question that I thought that many times made his job as a moderator more difficult. Did you guys notice that when he would ask a question, it was such a long process of running up that they were both trying to answer before he even got to the final question?
Nothing was clear and concise, and they weren't sure who was supposed to start first a lot of the times. It even had Joe Rogan trending last night because America was calling for him to be the next moderator.
It was like he was trying to explain the entire background of every one of his questions, and many times that was unnecessary. I do think that and I doubt that either party would agree to it, but I do think if you're going to give somebody 2 minutes to make a statement, I don't know why they can't turn the mic off of the other person and not allow them to comment during that 2 minutes. Now, when it turns into a total free flow and a firing range, so to speak, and they're going back and forth, I understand that. But I do think that would be an easy solution in some way to allow you to actually hear what somebody had to say for 2 minutes in a row. but I didn't think Chris Wallace did a very good job of getting answers out of both guys.